The main problem that we face is that our current growth is not at a recovery speed. So what a recovery means is that you grow at more than the rate that you averaged over the past. In order to recover, you got to get back to where you were. And so if you had a shock like a big recession that we just encountered, we have to grow at more than the long-term rate. So the long-term rate in the United States is about 3%. We usually grow at about 3% per year. Unfortunately, since the recovery, we've been growing not at a rate above 3%, which is what we need to get back, but actually at a rate below 3%. So rather than recovering, we're actually getting further and further away from where we need to be. So we need to get on a better trajectory, and the best way to do that is to increase investment, to increase productivity, and I view that as coming primarily from 4 policies. One is a lower and better, more efficient tax code. 2 would be a better regulatory structure, so a more cautious eye to regulation and regulation that enhances economic growth. The third would be getting the budget under control, so not growing the debt at record paces. And the fourth would be engaging in more international trade. If you look at the U.S. population, we're less than 5% of the world right now. We're a much bigger part of the world economy. But in order to continue that status in the world in terms of economic structure, we've got to be using the rest of the world as our market, not just the United States, and that means more trade. We've been way too reluctant to extend our trade over the past 3 to 4 years, and we need to do that much more aggressively. Most economists believe that we should move to something like a consumption tax. What is a consumption tax? It means it only taxes consumption. It does not tax income. There are a variety of technical reasons for that, but this is pretty much uncontroversial in the sense that almost all economists think this is the best way to go. The problem is making it progressive. So the easiest way to do that would be to keep something like the current progressive tax structure, but to allow for no taxation of investment. If you do that, you're basically saying we tax only consumption. A variety of ways to do that. Again, this is technical stuff, but the simplest way to do that is to allow businesses to expense. That means deduct from their taxes all investment that they make. That's a pro-growth strategy, and it's one that most economists tend to like. Even if you tax the rich as much as you can possibly tax the rich, again, using the president's numbers, there's just no way we're going to even come close to closing the gap between his projected spending and his projected tax revenue by taxing the rich. That's already built into his numbers, and we can't get there. So what that implies is that if we want to continue on this path of spending, we will have to raise the average tax for the average American by 50%. That means everybody would be paying about 50% more in taxes. The most likely way that that would come about would be to impose a VAT tax, which is like a federal retail sales tax on the economy. That would have negative impacts on economic growth, and so that would basically make us look a lot more like Europe. We have very large projected increases in spending. Most of this comes from Medicare and Medicaid. Social Security is also a problem, but Social Security is a problem that most people think we can deal with more readily. There are some pretty clean solutions to that problem. Medicare and Medicaid are much more problematic as we look down the road. And what we need to do is not cut Medicare and Medicaid, but we need to figure out ways to limit the growth in those expenditures. To move to a more efficient healthcare system. That probably means more incentives on the margin for people to bear their own costs of their own healthcare, make decisions in a more rational way. Some of the Obamacare measures are attempts to move in that direction. We'll see if they work. Many of the Obamacare measures are subsidies to the middle class that actually work in the wrong direction. So on net, we'll have to see if that's cost-saving. The president claims they are. I think many are skeptical that they will be cost-saving in the long run. I think most people who have analyzed that, including the Congressional Budget Office, have altered their opinions and revised upward the cost associated with the president's health care bill, but we'll see. I think that the Republican view that you should not raise taxes and that you have to focus on the spending side comes from the view that incentives matter, and incentives matter a whole lot. And if you start taxing people, eventually the money is going to move abroad. And by the way, that's not because Americans are going to invest elsewhere. The marginal dollar of investment in the United States is not coming from an American. It's coming from a Brit or from a Dutch person or from a German who's investing in the United States, and they can go anywhere with their money. So as we start raising taxes, those dollars are going to go elsewhere, and that's the concern. I think the Democrats have a somewhat different view. Their view is that we can do a good bit of redistribution, help the poor to a significant extent without too much effect on incentives, without too much effect on growth. During the recession, productivity actually went up. And you'd say, how could productivity go up during a recession? That's weird. Well, the reason for that is that what happened was, although output fell, demand for products fell, employment fell by even more. So what that means is that the remaining workers actually had to work harder. They had to make up for their colleagues who were laid off or the people who were not rehired during the recession. And in fact, that happened. And Catherine Shaw, one of my colleagues at the business school and one of our former students who's now at the University of Utah, Chris Stanton, and I have been doing a study looking at that specifically in the context of a firm where we can actually measure productivity. And we do see people working harder during the recession, perhaps as a result of their being somewhat more afraid that they'll lose their jobs, and they want to protect their jobs and are willing to work harder to do it. The question is whether that kind of efficiency enhancement that occurs in a short period of time can persist for a long time, and whether that can continue to grow, and I'm doubtful. So I think these increases in productivity that we saw for the short run are not sustainable over the long haul. In order to get productivity to grow over the long haul, we've got to do a number of things. Most of it comes from the investment side, but it means investment in physical capital, investment in human capital. That's what Stanford does. We are producers of human capital, and extremely good producers of human capital, and technology, which is derived from those two. So I think that's the formula for the long run. It's not making people work harder.